Welcome to the Norse lands and the home of Kraka Drak, or the Dragonhold, where the Norse dwarfs live. Kraka Drak is the largest of all the dwarf holds in the north and the wealthiest, and now you can play a campaign with them as Cataph has created a mod. This mod allows you to start off in the frozen north, leading an army for Thorfald Kromson, with unique heroes, roster and regiments of renown by Cataph. It has created a whole new dwarf experience from the standpoint of these dwarves. So in this video, I'll tell you about a new roster, which also has access to a lot of the dwarf units you're familiar with, except for the units I will put on screen now. Don't worry my dowie friends, this is not causing for grudging, because Kraka Drak has its own unique units to bring to your armies, and some surprises as well. So beards and belt lads, let's take a look at these fine dwarves. Thorfald Kromson is the king of the Kraka Drak, the greatest of the dwarf holds in the Norska. Surrounded by the harsh landscape, but he's an even hardy dwarf. Thorfald is a defensive force with high armour, shielded and high defence to boot. With your expert charge defence, he can easily hold the line as an anchor point, and of course can use his mighty oak stone to anchor the front line even more, or stand his ground to buff the dwarfs around him. He is very solid and very handy. He also can wield the mighty Ddraig splitter weapon, which increases his combat damage a fair bit, being not the greatest damage doer of the dwarves. But like Thorgrim, he is more of a buff lord. Also can wear the Blue Amber Curious to really annoy casters in his radius, making him quite handy on taking on the mages. Kraka Drak can field a Thane or a Rune Lord to either armies, but also has another type called the Ward Lord. Similar specs to a Rune Lord, this particular one brings a different set of runes, but more about that in a minute. Similar in stats to a Rune Lord, they hit a bit harder and are better on defence with higher stats across the board, and bring in a bronze shield as well. Also sporting magical attacks, making this Lord pretty handy to have around. The runes are a bit more combat orientated, so let's start with the Rune of Fire, giving his weapon, well, fire. Trolls are a big problem in the north, so it's a very handy rune to have. Next is the Rune of the Hunter, giving bonus to yards to nearby dwarfs. Very handy rune to have if you're facing the big beasts of the north. Rune of Negation gives you always that handy damage resistance. Rune of Fire, version 2, giving the Warlord a breath attack, which is always helpful, having not many spells being dwarves. Finally, this interesting ability, which allows you to hide your troops from the enemy. Interesting twist that you put the spell on the enemy, cloaking their ability to see in front of them. So this is kind of the reverse of a cloaking ability like a smoke bomb. Heroes now, you can take the usual Thane, Runesmith or Master Engineer, but you can also take a special Regiment of Renown unit, which I should put here instead of the other Regiments of Renown. Ogre Three Fingers is a demented Runesmith, but is quite a potent force on the field. Bringing a range weapon, but limited shots, and not much AP to that damage, but has a good 220 AP on his actual weapon. As you can see from the quick glance at the stats, this is your to watch carefully with your armour, well for a dwarf, but even your melee defence. This unit can be killed off surprisingly quickly for a hero. Make sure you keep an eye on him, because he has Berserk mechanic, which for a unit that is not the toughest, is not the greatest ability. You need to back him up with some high melee defence units to soak up the pressure. He does bring his own runes, which can help in a pinch, but first giving him regeneration, which makes up slightly for his weak armour and defence. Rune of Beauty, making his own allies terrified of him. Apparently old Three Fingers here might not be a yucca. Master Rune of Recovery, which is a good damage dealer, much like Rune of Wrath. Finally, a Weary Curious rune. This gives everyone around him a huge physical resistance, making him temporary like ethereal units, but huge decrease in damage. So if you're fond of a tar pit line of dwarves, bringing this rune along will make them even tougher to go grind down. Base infantry now. As I said before, the following units are not available, but they do make up this with some Norscan units, namely the Norscan Marauders, the Warriors with great weapons, and Norscan Champions as melee infantry. But they also bring Norscan Horsemen, bringing their own ranged attack. First of these new types of runic infantry are the Ogre Parades. At 820 points, these bear the rune of Ogre Three Fingers, make them slightly weaker in armour and defence, but still provide quite a punch and damage. With Frenzy and Berserk to buff themselves even more, making them a unit I would take in limited numbers as an entire frontline berserking messes up your nice rank and file of a dowie. It's never a good thing to have. We do have some regen bonus, as three things does, but it's a curious unit. The stats are not great, but they can cause some damage, but they're only 9 AP, so feel best against units that are weaker than them. So an excellent burst damage on chaff, but they can't take much damage back. Ogre are pretty much swayers, but are used against infantry. They do have the easy little bit of armour as well at 25. With good stats across the board for 850 points. They provide interesting flank attackers. They are fast, well-ish, for a dwarf, let's be honest, but would do still take the time getting there. I like the idea of using them to attack the gaps in the front line. Good, solid, well-spaced dwarf warriors, and then push through a couple of units of these to try to get in behind, or at least at the sides of some of the ranks in the front line. Bringing the range mechanic makes them good against infantry the longer they stay in, so some buff through the units will definitely make this unit quite the presence on the battlefield for a cheaper cost. Stormbeards. This is a more defensive based unit of runic infantry at 850 points. They have good stats and a noticeable increase on your standard dwarf warriors. Where they can also hold the front liners just as well, they also add a bit more damage to it. Useful against the more tough front lines of opposing factions. One thing to point out is their charge. It's not so bad, so make sure you hit the enemy straight on. Not the thing you usually do with dwarves, but worth it with the Kraka Drak units. Ward Bearers are even more defensively minded than the Stormbeards, but for the same 850 points. A much more stand there and take the brute force of attack, but not too bad in combat, but not as effective as the Stormbeards. A good mix both of these units can provide dividends. Have these in the first rank and then plug in the Stormbeards to add some more damage with their better charge. Huskars. Much larger than your standard dwarf and more expensive at 1120, with a notable unit decrease of 20 models. This unit brings huge AP at 41 and some anti-charge at 5. I personally treat these as flank units to protect the side. They may not have a huge anti-charge, but it's enough to cause the character to at least be more careful. With a ranged attack, if only at limited range, and ammo to soften the unit up before they meet. They can provide a useful anchor to a flank. Maybe not as good as a spear unit, but dwarves don't do spears, because that's silly elf business, so let's move on. Some new types of range now, with spike gunners. At only 520, they're the cheapest dwarf ranged weapon, even below quarriers. Short range, but can cause huge damage and bring shield breaker as well. And all that damage is AP. And so if, and it's a big if, you can get them in a position to attack a flank that will cause huge damage for such a low cost. Just remember that your rate of fire of 12 seconds per shot, so this unit cannot stop a charge, so keep them in the middle of your army and then move out when the chance arises, because in combat they are pretty weak. Another short range missile unit, Pathgrinders, bringing some explosive ammunition to the battlefield. Bit quicker older time and more magic ammo, this unit can cause serious damage to your armour units. This would really create some scathing in moments, so I must pick against them or anything of this yo armour build. They're especially handy because even against chaff they can last because they have good stats across the board compared to a chaff. Again, placement is key, but shooting to the flank of chaff units would cause them to break quickly due to the nice damage they bring with that explosive shot. Rock Splitters. Pretty much Iron Drakes at 900 points, so we'll wait fire again by 17 seconds, so don't have them anywhere near the front line. They can cause huge damage with massive AP damage of 115 and the anti-charge bonus of 18, making an awesome monster killer. Move them into position and keep them protected. Again, never in the first couple of ranks. A widespread army is always handy for any dwarf faction. A unit of 2 of these is a must against any army that has yard units available to them. Without your traditional cannon, this is one of your main anti-yard threats. Of course they have bolt throws, but this unit should be taken along as a bit more emphasis on the more mobile force. Troll Melter. Lastly, a new type of catapult, dedicated to dealing with those pesky trolls, which do flourish in the north. But Troll Melter, at 850, is a bit more expansive than your standard catapult, but brings excellent tools to the battlefield. They fire ranged attacks with a sizzling fresh debuff, and have a huge charge bonus of 200 before you panic at the young missile damage stated. These are Troll's Nightmare, and one of these in an army when in the north is essential, I would say. First up, we have a elite damaging unit, the Raiders of the Lost Orc. This unit took out some orcs, but did not kill their shaman, so they left with the Curse of the Lost Orc, making them very weak against magic, well for a dwarf, but tough in combat. High damage and reasonably solid stats, making this a good unit to have in a fight, and attacks bring a debuff of minus 25%, making the unit they're hitting a target for one nice rune attack. Stone Guard, a elite bunch of raw bearers who are unbreakable. A range attack, which they can launch before the unit meets, and an expert charge defense. Encourage as well, making this a perfect anchor point for the front line. One of my favourite regiments of renown in this list, because they're a perfect mix of toughness, decent damage, and AP of 27, encourage, charge defense, and unbreakable. Nothing not really to like about this unit. At 950 points, I must have it in any army. Shame you can only have one of them and only 40 models. Crimson Bane. Another really good solid frontline troop at 1100 points, bringing some fire and magic attacks to your front line, which is definitely where I put this unit. These or a Stone Guard would happily can be used as an anchor point. I just prefer the Arse unit because of all round stats, even though this is a full unit of 100 models. AP at 16 is good but not exceptional, but does make this unit handy against any normal size infantry. They are famed of going into a nest of Cran Mordor and coming out to the hive at the other end, whacking up an insane amount of kills on the Skaven. True Sons of Aurich. Maybe not as insane as an Ironbreakers regiment of renown, this unit is close though at 1400. Another defense powerhouse, making rage to this unit, making them a great hold the iron tough unit. Another ability adds some much needed damage and AP. As this unit only has 10, I would say it's a solid unit and maybe a tad expensive, but these stats do stick out. 100 strong, so they'll certainly be tough to deal with. Against the Chaos it may struggle without lack of AP though. The Forsaken, a elite unit of Slayers at 1500 points. No armor, as is the norm, but pretty high defense and devastating damage against anti-charge with 24 bonus, and a huge AP as well at 41. Thrag took over Kraka Drak, and this unit was not at that hold that day, so they're sworn oath to kill the mighty troll. Bringing Frenzy and Death Blow, they have huge damage, but they can rampage, which could cost them a lot if they get picked off by ranged attacks, so caution is needed. Controlling the battlefield's missile units can make this unit deadly and give them full reign to go after those large targets, and Yitto can stop them. Shriek Guard, the bodyguard of the Norse King and the most expensive unit in the roster at 1650 points. A high damage with high AP of 41 and a small infantry bonus of 5, making them very deadly on the battlefield, with the rage mechanic again making them even tougher to deal with in combat. They also provide a guardian aura as well, making them a perfect unit to go alongside your main hero and Yord. An ideal companion for Ogre Three Fingers to help protect him, but useful in any army where damage is needed. They also bring a small range attack as well, just to add a little bit more soften up before the unit meets its victims. Some elite missile infantry now in the shape of the Thunderbolts, an elite path grinder, which brings magical ammo to the battlefield, and a strong debuff blinding the enemy they are shooting at. So equally useful against missile or melee units. A very strong unit all in all, but it's at 850 points, so it's one of the most expensive in the range. In my opinion, that debuff makes them worthwhile, allowing you to heavily debuff a charging unit and then switch to a missile unit to reduce opposition fire. Also, they're not too bad in a fight, with a strong defense and a shield. They won't kill much, but they will hold long enough for you to get some backup in. The Carrions. As mentioned, there are some Norse units in this army, and this is a elite mixture of Cav, which you can put with some standard Norscan huntsmen. Providing some mobile skirmish for the dwarf army is very handy, and this unit brings frenzy as well as the rage mechanic, making them not as bad on the charge and sustained combat against weak Cav or just chasing down weak routing units. They also bring a net to help snare their victims, giving Kraka Drak some great options on the battlefield, and gives you a nice change of actual pace to the battle, which is a rare thing as a fast unit a dwarf can use. well, except the ride gyrocopters, which of course this faction cannot use. Thanks for watching my Kraka Drak video by Catap. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope to see you in the next video.